Thank you very much. I'm working across two computers here, so please bear with me. So thank you very much for the introduction. It's greatly appreciated. This particular lecture is about Delhi's relationship with the Jinn. And to frame that, I'll talk initially about, well, what the Jinn are, who the Jinn are, and that will kind of give you a little bit more insight and make the photographs more relevant when we come to them. But I'm sure you're all very familiar with William Dalrymple, and he wrote the celebrated travelogue, The City of Djinns, a record of the year he spent in Delhi as a young correspondent. That particular book started my own real love affair with the subcontinent, and it inspired a 3-week trip in 2009, and then 5 months over 2012 and 2013. In October of last year, I returned to Delhi, but specifically to look for the eponymous Djinns, as mentioned in Dalrymple's book. This trip was actually a challenging one, which quite surprised me. I considered myself kind of an old India established traveller, but it still had some surprises for me when I went back. But I followed Dalrymple's key sites that he mentioned in the book, and then went to some other sites associated with the Jinn. And it was a very interesting trip. I was caught in flash rainstorms, explored Delhi's Central Ridge Forest, and I met exorcists and photographed the possessed. So, with that introduction, so this is the City of Djinns. Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah, that's perfect. Absolutely fine. Thank you. Do you want to get rid of these as well? Is that these? Yeah. All right. Cool. So this is the introduction to City of Djinns, and this is the initial site that's mentioned in the book. This is a conversation between Dalrymple and a Sufi called Pir Sadruddin. And he describes him here as it was in the citadel of Feroz Shah Kotla that I met my first Sufi. Pir Sadruddin had weasel eyes and a beard as tangled as a miner's nest. The mystic sat me down on the carpet and offered me tea and told me about Djinns. Could you show me a Jinn? I asked. Certainly, replied Pir, but you would run away. So why would you run away? With good reason, it would seem. The Jinn, or Jinn, Jinn, is an alternative spelling you'll also see, are supernatural beings associated with Arabic and later Islamic tradition. Mentioned frequently in the Quran, they are said to be formed of smokeless, scorching fire. In the opening pages of the City of Djinns, Dalrymple meets Pir, and they have that discussion about the Jinn. But where this takes place is in the once formidable citadel of Firozabad, the 5th city of Delhi. This was built by Emperor Feroz Shah Kotla, and it's here where the introduction to the Jinn starts. So this is another passage from the book. Though it has been burned by invaders time and time again, millennium after millennium, still the city was rebuilt. Each time it rose like a phoenix from the fire, just as Hindus believe that the body will be reincarnated over and over again until it becomes perfect. So it seemed Delhi was destined to appear in a new incarnation century after century. The reason for this, said Sadruddin, was that the Djinns loved Delhi so much that they could never bear to see it empty or deserted. To this day, every house, every street corner was haunted by them. You could not see them, said Sadruddin, but if you concentrated, you'd be able to feel them, to hear their whisperings, or even if you were lucky to sense their warm breath on your face. So, according to Islamic belief, Jinn are creatures that conceal themselves from humans. So they can see us, but we cannot see them. Furthermore, Jinn have the same needs as humans. For example, they eat, drink, procreate, and they die. The belief that Jinn are capable of causing physical and mental harm to human beings through possession or causing ill health or misfortune is also widely accepted amongst the Muslim population. And that is the Muslim population worldwide. The work I'm talking about here and the photographs you're getting are obviously specifically to do with Delhi, but belief in the Jinn is is global. Wherever there's Islam, there is belief in the jinn. So the people of the fire. So the image you see on the right is a page from the Book of Wonders, and this is a 14th century manuscript from the Bodleian Library. And this is Iblis. The black figure in the center here is Iblis, Lord of all demons. It was essentially, you would equate with the Christian idea of Satan. So belief in the jinn originated in the Arab East and continued unabated through the Arabic world during Roman and Byzantine periods to the coming of Islam in the 7th century, where these spirit beings were integrated into the new faith through the Quranic revelation and the personal experiences of the Prophet. Two streams of knowledge are at work here. One was the folk interpretation of the jinn, which was largely Mesopotamian in origin, developed in cities and towns with a fearful eye on the wastes of the desert, and incorporated the age-old beliefs about nature spirits, demons, and divinities. The other stream was channeled through Greek and Roman philosophers and proto-scientists and focused on the role of demons as intermediary between man and gods. To believers, jinn are just another type of creature created by Allah, along with angels, humans, and plants, less exalted than angels. The jinn rank above humans and in some respects below them in others. As a result, the jinn are often mentioned in the Quran in conjunction with humans. The word jinn and its variants occur at least 22 times in the Quran, and the word shaitan, which is obviously the root of the word Satan, and its plural occur 88 times, as does the word for angels, malaka or malak. For sake of comparison, the word for sea, bahar, appears 33 times. So you can see how ingrained and core this is as part of the overall Islamic faith, and the Islamic understanding of the world. The jinn of Islam enjoy supernatural powers, but they also have some human qualities like intelligence, emotions, and free will. The jinn who chose Islam are generically considered good jinn. Those who reject God are considered demons. Those who follow a revealed religion other than Islam have a more ambiguous state. That would be your Christian jinn and your Jewish jinn. In Western Arabia, where Islam was born, one of the many roles of jinn was to inspire poets and soothsayers. The ability to recite beautiful poetry or foretell the future was thought to be a sign of being possessed by the jinn. There's a similar idea within Hinduism, where one is possessed by a god. The term, it literally translates as God crazy, where the possession or overtaking by a divine spirit manifests in divine poetry and ability to tell the future as well. So this painting is by Johann Jacob Frey. It's called A Caravan Caught in the Simon Wind near Gaza. And the Simon wind is seen as the actual source of these spirits. So according to old Muslim legend, which is popular amongst the Egyptians, the first jinn were created by Allah from Simon, or a hot, scorching desert wind. And this was Asum bin Jan Taramush. And the word Jan here in his name is where jinn comes from. He and his descendants were given dominion over the earth, and they followed the rules handed down to them by Allah. In this pre-Adamite world, inhabited by the jinn ancestors of great power, as many as 72 kings held sway, and each of them bore the royal title Suleiman, or Solomon. The last of these Suleimans was Jan ibn Jan, and for him, the collective name for all jinn races is said to derive. Islamic tradition said Allah created the jinn before the creation of Adam. Both the jinn and men were created in heaven and lived in paradise. As God relates in the Quran, we created man from sounding clay, from mud molded into shape. And the jinn race we had created before them, from the fire of the scorching wind. And no one knows how much time passed between the creation of the jinn and man. Some scholars contended that the jinn had populated and ruled the earth before the creation of Adam, but they relinquished this role when Allah punished them for their arrogance and pride. These categories of jinn: Jan, jinn, shaitan, ifrit, and marid. These terms tend to overlap and are often not defined as one would hope. There tends to be some very, very localized belief in spirit entities that are broad terms defined as Jinn across the Asian world. You will have people living by coasts and rivers will have a particular type of Asian or aquatic spirit that they're afraid of, and this will again be termed Jinn. But there's very, very localized versions. So, Jan, the first word here, is a collective term referring to the masses of jinns of all types. This is sometimes interchangeable with Jinn. Jinn is used more often to refer to specific individuals or families or tribes of the fire spirits. As mentioned, a Jinn can be good or evil, but shaitans are the children of the king devil Iblis and are always evil. Ifrits are more powerful than shaitans and are the most evil. Marids are evil as well and are the most powerful of all. And above all, they have the ability to shapeshift or shield themselves with invisibility. So you can see these are perceived to be very, very powerful elements of folklore that people are truly afraid of. And the interesting thing, these all sound absolutely kind of fantastic to us, this array of spirits, what their attributed abilities are. But belief in these entities is very much alive and well. The Jinn in Western culture. So these images should be relatively familiar. The Jinn in Western culture has mostly kind of a comical image, principally focusing around the genie aspect. And of course, it's not all cartoons. Although these are culturally naive interpretations of the Jinn, there's a certain amount of truth in what we have here. The most obvious here is the genie, the grantor of wishes. The second is the marriage, or more specific, the sexual union between the Jinn and the human being. Something we see in the recent series American Gods. This is this image here. And I Dream of Jeannie was probably a more sanitized version of this particular theme. This union between Jinn and human is a recurrent theme and often is not a good one. In the case of linen demons, or incubus, male, or in succubus, female, of course, the linen demon gets its name from Lilith. But we'll come to that particular entity later. One of the more famous of these human being Jinn relationships is between the King of Solomon and Bilquis, or she's better known as the Queen of Sheba. And I'll come to that later as well. But in terms of all this unions between human beings and spirits, that this is seems to be endemic in the pre-Adam, well, just after Adam and Eve arrive on the scene and they get cast out of Eden. So according to Talmudic tradition, after Adam and Eve were driven from Eden, Adam was separated from Eve for 130 years. During this time, they both had intercourse with spirits, and from these unions, the Mazikeen were born. Some Talmudic scholars have called them ghouls or demons. Victorian explorer and translator Sir Richard F. Burton believed the Mazikeen were the equivalent to the Jinn. They were able to foretell the future, and they could shapeshift, and like humans, they enjoyed feasting and drinking and married and had children. So you can start to see that this theme is overlapping cultures, but it tends to be where our Abrahamic faiths are coming from, and it spreads out from there. This is some statistics from the UK. In order to give some context on the widespread belief in the Jinn, I thought it would be useful to look at a recent study examining the subject. So this is from the International Journal of Culture and Mental Health, a study done in 2011. Belief about Jinn, black magic and the evil eye amongst Muslims in the UK, age, gender and first language influences. The study was conducted in the city of Leicester. These are generally first generation, but mainly from India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, and to a lesser extent the Middle East and North Africa, and second and third generation of immigrants of Muslim origin. There was a study group of 180 individuals, of whom 69 refused to participate. A total of 111 participants completed the study, 52 of whom were female. Table 2 summarises the beliefs about existence in the Jinn, black magic and the evil eye. The majority believed in the existence of the Jinn, 80%. Black magic 65% and the evil eye 73%. Around 60% of respondents believed in Jinn possession. Females were more likely than males to believe in the existence of black magic. So you can see these are sometimes second or third generation Muslim immigrants, and the belief is still hugely prevalent. And the authors surmised as well at this particular study that the percentage would have been higher, although there was a certain perception of embarrassment talking to Westerners about belief in the Jinn. But they actually believe that the figure of, 80... the figure of 80% actually isn't entirely reflective, that it would have been higher only for that factor. Now, this is Bilquis, the Queen of Sheba. On the image on the far side here, that is from a recent television show called American Gods. This is a classical painting of the Queen of Sheba. So this is the first of our big hitters in terms of Jinn lore. So this is Bilquis. She's described in the Bible as simply a queen of the East. Modern scholars believe she came from the kingdom of Aksum in Ethiopia, the kingdom of Saba in Yemen. Possibly she ruled over both. They both claim her. The main clue is that she brought bales of incense with her as a gift. Frankincense only grows in these two areas. Both countries, as I said, claim her. King Solomon heard of Sheba and her great kingdom. He also heard that she had strange features, a left foot that is cloven like that of a goat and a hairy leg. It didn't put him off. This rumour was started by the Jinn who had been enslaved to Solomon via the talismanic ring given to him by the angel Gabriel that was engraved with the most high name of God. With this ring he could command the Jinn. They feared the courting couple would marry and produce an heir which would continue their slavery, so they went out to try and separate the lovers. Eager to see the story was true, he had the floor of his court polished until it was like glass and resembled a pool of water. When the Queen of Sheba walked across the floor, raising her dress, Solomon sees a reflection of her cloven foot right in front of his eyes, and it transforms and becomes normal. In another version, it does not say if the foot is cloven, but it said that her legs were exceptionally hairy. They had a son, and 7 years later, she died, and Solomon had her buried in the Syrian city of Palmyra. The city, according to legend, is said to have been constructed by the Jinn under the orders of King Solomon. Now, you might recognize this figure from the famous film The Exorcist, on the left here. So the film The Exorcist brought this particular Mesopotamian wind demon, a primordial Jinn, through into Western consciousness. Jinn are often associated with the wind and are said to have traveled by it. This is Pazuzu. And he's first mentioned by the Sumerians and is later identified in Assyrian and Babylonian mythology as the son of Hanpa, who is lord of all demons and sometimes identified with Satan himself. He turns up also in the William Burroughs novel Cities of the Red Night, where he's called the Lord of Fevers and Plagues, dark angel of the four winds, with rotting genitals from which he howls through sharpened teeth over stricken cities. Although most certainly evil, Pazuzu sometimes curiously appears on ancient amulets as a defense against other demons, a sort of a early way of hedging one's bets. In the brutal and unforgiving times of antiquity, this seemed to be a pretty good strategy. What Pazuzu represents are the dangers of the wastelands. His form is made up of all the dangerous predators of the deserts. A hybrid human animal with a lion's and canine head and bird's wings and a scorpion's tail. And the small head figurine here is from the British Museum, which is also a representation of Pazuzu. Iblis, or Azazel. The Quran says that Satan was among the angels whom God ordered to bow down to Adam after his creation. It says in 1850, "And when we said to the angels, prostrate to Adam, and they prostrated except for Iblis. He was of the Jinn and departed from the command of his Lord. Then will you take him and his descendants as allies other than me, while they are enemies to you. Wretched it is for the wrongdoers as an exchange." While all the other angels obeyed God and bowed down to Adam, Satan disobeyed haughtily, saying, "I am better than him. You created me from fire and created him from clay." And And this black figure in the background here is Iblis. So all the other angels are prostrating themselves before Adam, except for Iblis, who stands here in the back. If you just bear with me, I'm just going to zoom in here. My notes are a bit too small. Iblis, also known as Azazel and Abu Murrah, the father of bitterness, rules over Monday. This is an odd thing with the Jinn. You'll often see with kind of these kind of Jinn princes, they tend to rule over specific days, specific months, specific colours. Iblis was potentially not an actual angel, so he did not have to follow the command of God, as the Jinn have free will like human beings. Whether Satan, Iblis is Satan. Whether Satan was actually an angel or a Jinn whom God elevated to the angelic assembly is a matter of debate amongst Muslim scholars. Some scholars, such as Ibn Abbas, believe that Satan was actually an angel whom God created out of fire. He was the most worshipful and knowledgeable of all angels, thus the Quran identifies Satan as a Jinn. It means that he belonged to a class of fiery creatures, the fire spirits, which encompass both heavenly Jinn and earthly Jinn. Such a notion is evocative of the biblical seraphim, a rank of angels that look like burning fire. Now, interestingly enough, some Sufis see this character as a paradigm of love and indeed the perfect worshipper of Allah. So despite the traditional interpretation of Satan's fall from grace as an act of excessive pride and rebellion against God, the Sufis believe that this was an act of self-sacrifice for God's love, that Satan refused to bow down to Adam out of his uncompromising monotheism and devotion, that he refused to venerate anything or anyone other than God. The well-known Sufi Muslim theologian Al-Ghazali, he narrates encountering Iblis on the slopes of Sinai. Moses hailed him and asked, "O Iblis, why do you not prostrate before Adam?" Iblis replied, "Heaven forbid that anyone worship anything but the one." This command was a test, which is an interesting kind of spin on the view of this character. As you'd expect, Iblis turns up in the Garden of Eden. He hides in the serpent's mouth, and this leads to a familiar end. Only in the Islamic version of this tale, the responsibility for the fall is shared equally between Adam and Eve. Iblis married the serpent, and they had offspring. At various times, Iblis also mated with other beings to produce a number of demons. One of these lovers was the Karina, or she's better known in Western culture, Lilith. She went on to bear numerous Jinn offspring, and amongst her many titles, earned the Mother of Jinn. And here she is. So the inscription here, "O flyer in a dark chamber, go away at once, O lily." The inscription here was found on a 7th century BC tablet in Ardasan Talash in Syria. Lilith first appeared as Lilu, a kind of storm demon in Sumer, about 4000 BC. She was the bride of Samiel, the demon king or angel of death. This is the Burnley relief from Babylon. Some scholars identify the figure in the relief as Lilith. This is contested. It may also represent Ishtar. She was hugely feared by mothers as a child killer. She was the bearer of disease, and at childbirth, hadiths were recited to keep her at bay. So she was a child killer, a vampire, the first succubus. Her titles include Elat, the mother of night, the mother of Jinn, El Confusa, the female scarab. Most recently, she became a feminist icon for her declaration of sexual independence. She also later became associated with the Karina, a female Jinn who acts as a woman's shadow and wreaks havoc in the woman's relationships. Now, in terms of that declaration of sexual independence, that's in relation to Adam, where she says, "I will not lie below." So medieval Kabbalistic legends present Lilith as the first sexual partner of Adam. During their union, she refused to lie below Adam, essentially saying that she was the superior one. Rejected by Adam, she came to hate all humankind, and because of this was consumed by a jealous rage. And this is painting by John Collier in 1887. But she specifically hated children, and she was seen as the deadly enemy of all women, especially to new mothers in her jealous fury. So this is the last slide in the introduction to the Jinn. This gives you kind of a wide understanding of how large these figures loom across the Islamic world. This picture, of course, is Sargon of Akkad, or Sargon the Great, and this is in relation to possession, changelings, and abductions. So Sargon, the mighty king, King Agad am I. My mother was a changeling, and my father I knew not. So he's attributing his own heritage as being part Jinn. Sargon the Great, who ruled over the Akkadian Empire 4,000 years ago and claimed to be half Jinn. And the theme of the swapped child, or the changeling, is very common in medieval culture and reflects of concerns over infants thought to be afflicted with unexplained diseases, disorders, or developmental disabilities, which ties to the danger that Lilith and the wider Jinn world represented. Simple charms such as an inverted coat or an open iron scissors left where the child sleeps were believed to prevent this. And fear of iron is a recurrent theme that turns up in the Jinn world, which I'll visit later. But belief in changelings, this endured also in parts of Europe, and particularly in Ireland, where it endured as late as 1895, where a woman called Bridget Cleary was murdered by her husband, who believed her to be a changeling, and the actual Bridget was taken by fairies. Now, the fear of iron is also something that turns up as well in Irish folk culture. The fairies' fear of iron turns up in Irish culture as well, where you had iron tongs left across a cradle to protect a child from being taken by fairies, and a fairy child left in their place, a changeling. But why did the Jinn possess? Well, for many reasons. Some good, some quite bad. It can happen when the individual harms a Jinn, even just by accident, and if this individual is weakened at some point and becomes vulnerable to possession, the Jinn may do so. As for the symptoms of possession, they are turning away and reacting strongly when hearing the adhan, the call to prayer, or Quran, fainting, seizures, and falling when the Quran is read over them, a lot of disturbing dreams, being alone, keeping away from people, and behaving strangely. The devil who is dwelling within him may speak when the Quran is recited over them. Okay, so let's go to Delhi. This is Feroz Shah Kotla. And this site is believed to be a home of 10,000 Jinn. It's believed to be one of the most haunted areas of Delhi, which naturally made it the first stop on my trip to Delhi last year. So this is a fortress built by the Sultan Feroz Shah Kotla to house his version of Delhi, a city called Firozabad. A pristine polished sandstone Topra Ashokan pillar from the 3rd century rises from the palace's crumbling remains. You'll see that in the next shot. This is one of the many pillars of Ashoka left by Moran Emperor. By the Moran Emperor. It was moved from Topra Kalan in Pongati of the Yamuna district in Haryana to Delhi under the orders of Feroz Shah Tulag of the Delhi Sultanate and re-erected in its present location. And there it is. Now, during this particular trip, I had the assistance of a young Kashmiri photographer who acted as my fixer on this trip, and would translate for me and help get me into these particular locations. So when we first got to the ruins here of Feroz Shah Kotla, home to 10,000 Djinns, I rode there in the back of a rickshaw, just chatting away about general things, and eventually arrived at the gate to the ruins. There, a guard and an elderly woman sat at a rickety table with an old metal petty cash box. And when we asked for directions to the pillar, the main feature of these ruins, where you can see these archways, these are grottos all the way around the ruins. So we were looking for this particular site. The ticket collector kind of gently wobbled her head and looked quite uncomfortable. And when we kind of furtherly pressed the query, the same no answer would come forth. We made it clear that we're looking for the site associated with the Jinn, and despite being essentially the caretaker for the place, she wouldn't tell us where it was. I mean, it's blindingly obvious once you know where it is. It's like right in the middle, right in front of you. But this, Shams explained to me afterwards, was she didn't want to anger the Jinn. She was afraid of actually upsetting the spirits believed to be here by telling a foreigner where they lived. It happened the same thing. There was a cottage just over to the far side of this picture where a gentleman was sitting outside, wouldn't tell us where the grottos were. So eventually we found them ourselves. So here is the first of the grottos. You can see the locks across the top on the paper here. So this is a family who are praying to the Jinn. They're doing circuits of all the different grottos around it, much like you would see the Stations of the Cross and the Catholic faith. They're going around petitioning the Jinn for their favour. So these letters, you'll see these as we go through this essay. Here are offerings of bread and milk curds. The real day when everything happens is Thursday. That's when this particular site and other sites related with the Jinn are absolutely thronged. But the offerings are left there from earlier in the week and from previous visitors. Now you can see here there's a little passport photograph and some bangles. So just here is remnants of an oil lamp, passport photograph, and some bangles with a knot tied around the bangle. So the bangles seem to be related to a request for a child. So there are women petitioning the Jinn to help them get pregnant. And passport photographs with a lot of the letters, personal images were stapled and attached to the letters. And the lamps were just candles that are left there for the Jinn. There's more here in old incense stubs. Then these locks signify agreements. There's a bargain with the spirits here. If you help me achieve whatever my goal is, I'll do something in return. And that lock is a signifier of the bond of that agreement. And again, this is a tradition that you'll see on most of the bridges of Europe, where young couples lock their relationship together on the railings of bridges. And here is a letter to the Jinn with the passport photograph attached. And here's the grottos beneath beneath Feroz Shah Kotla. Now this was filled with bats, and there were side chambers off the main tunnel, and each was used as an altar for offerings and prayer. And it was quite pungently smelt of bats and guano, and yes, bats flying all over the place. So it felt very Bram Stokerish and appropriate for a home for the Djinns. So this, can you see these all right? Is this light a little bit too bright? Yeah, okay. Okay, cool. So this is a young girl. She's part of a family we met who were going from grotto to grotto beneath the pillar, praying to the Jinn. Her father, Babu Khan, explained to me that his family had been praying for 12 days in a row to manifest wishes, and some of which had already come true. This is his daughter, Miha, who's 10 years old. This is Babu Khan. I don't know if you can actually see that one here, but that's right into one of the grottos. You can see it was pitch black, and it was literally lit by tiny oil lamps. Again. There's more letters against one of the altars. And you see the yellow here is barfi. It's decaying sweets that have been left for the spirits as well as offerings. And what he's doing here is he's refilling lamps and leaving fresh sweets for the Jinn. And they're leaving out water as well. And here is his family praying. I followed them. They went from grotto to grotto. Here is Mihak again. It's my colleague Shams reading through the letters. There's one in Urdu. And interestingly enough, some of these were handwritten. Others had been photocopied. So there seemed to be kind of not a huge amount of protocol towards creating the letters. And what they were requesting are pretty much what you'd expect. Make my father win the Thursday night gold jackpot. And these are more letters to the Jinn pinned against the wall. This chap turns up everywhere. So he definitely went belt and braces and took dozens of copies of his letters to the Jinn, and in every single grotto around the site. And we took some time to read the letters, and as I said, they had what you'd expect. They covered requests from kind of the naive and stereotypical to very much the tragic and sad. Some of these were around looking to get to Hollywood to become a movie star. There was a plea for assistance to change gender. There was there's a huge cricket ground by here, and a massive rainstorm just happened while I was there. So this letter was kind of go to Hollywood and make money. And it gave a kind of a sad personal history that this particular person had wanted to change gender and was saying that they were unhappy in their born gender, and could the Jinn help them go to Hollywood to achieve this. And another letter basically requested the Jinn to intercede on the behalf of a woman whose husband and sons were in the grip of drug and alcohol addiction, and how that was tearing her family apart. And it seemed very much a last resort. You know, it kind of reminded me of the kind of Catholic tradition of Saint Jude, the patron saint of lost causes. It was a similar thing. Now this is the pillar of Ashokan on top of the ruins. So the pillar is said to be associated with the chief Jinn of the site, Latwal Baba. And the 13.1 meter high column was made of polished sandstone and dates back to the 3rd century BC. It was brought to the site under the orders of Feroz Shah. And it's one of a series of columns around the Indian subcontinent, erected and described with edicts by the Moran king Ashoka. And most notably, you'll know the Indian symbol of the 3 lines standing back to back is from one of these pillars. So only 19 survive with inscriptions, and only 6 with animal capitals. They were the target for Muslim iconoclasm. The Ashoka lines, which are the cluster of 4 lines I mentioned earlier, standing back to back, are the national emblem of India. These lines stand on Ashoka chakra, which is the wheel, or the Wheel of Dharma, which you'll famously see on the Indian flag. So they're very much core Indian symbols, and this site, this one is believed to be possessed by a Jinn. Closer shot. There's quite a nice dramatic cloud shot of it. Give it a bit of a Ghostbusters feel. And here around the cage of the pillar, there's more tokens, there's more bonding agreements, and particularly here we're looking at ones for motherhood. This is Shams, the Kashmiri photographer who worked with me on this project. And this has taken us to the second site. So this site we went to, the first site we went to, that's the one where Dalrymple met the Sadhu Pir at the start, where he said, if you want me to, I could show you a Jinn, but you'll run away. That's the specific location. This is the location that I found myself here, and it's not mentioned in Dalrymple's book. And this is a tiny, tiny temple in Delhi's Central Ridge Forest. And it's very, very difficult to find. It's the Khwaja Moluddin Chichi. It's a tiny holy shrine in the forest. And it's a grave of a Sufi saint, naturally, of the same name. It's an important aspect of Delhi's relationship with the Djinns, primarily because it's a site of exorcism. And people come from all over India to use it. Now, there's other sites as well that do this, but this one was so tiny and so remote, and it's not a beautiful place at all. I thought it was important to show because it shows how deep this belief goes. Now, weirdly, this is in the center of Delhi. It's in the Ridge Forest. And there's this tiny place. It's 800 years old. It's remains of a village destroyed by the British at the turn of the 20th century. It's very humid and almost silent, except for the occasional shrill bird cry. My camera almost immediately fogged up. The minute I got there, I took my lens cap off, so bump straight away, just covered up with steam. And this is the site. It's basically a little brick and a cement hut. It's surrounded by the white marble graves of previous Sada Nashin, all of whom who were the ancestors of the current Salyada Nashin, Ali Khan, who we'll see later here. And he inherited his role as the shrine's caretaker and exorcist from his father after his father passed away. Here are the graves. Now, I'm going to try and play some video next of it's just 3 minutes.
Almost on every Thursday, people from around they bring the patients, who are enforced with the Jinn.
Yeah.
So they bring them to the saint to get them treated. So, like almost every time, the person is treated. So their meaning of exorcism, their way of exorcism is like they tie the person and they tie the person with the chain and read a few verses, and the Jinn appears and the Jinn speaks through that person, through the voice of that person, and then they read few verses, keep reading until they say that the Baba, the saint, helps them to go, helps the Jinn to go out and leave the body. And they say like this shrine, it's quite sacred because every time people come here, anything they ask from here, their wishes get fulfilled. Yeah, so that's it.
Cool. And he inherited the job from his father, is it?
He showed us there are 4 other graves over there, right? The one grave which is in front of the shrine, it is his great-grandfather. So he says that his great-grandfather and this saint, they were related. They used to be here for together.
Right.
But then he says that this saint, this shrine is for 800 years old.
Yeah.
And then he says in 1911, when the British was here, from the president's place, from President's Palace, the British fired tanks to this place, because there was a village over here called Molcha. The Molcha village. There, it was a Muslim-dominated village, but Hindus also lived here. So they wanted, the British wanted them to go out because they felt some suspicious activities in here. So they wanted this village to be, the people to leave this village altogether. So this family, his family, he says they didn't leave. So since there was this shrine already over here, his grandfather stayed. His father stayed. He says he hasn't seen his great-grandfather, but yes, he has seen his grandfather. So he died, and he was buried there only. His father died. His father has been buried there only. His mother has been buried next to his father. So yeah, those are the 4 graves.
Okay.
And this village is no more here. The people have left already, but this place is still called Molcha.
Yeah.
Okay. This is one of the graves with a Sufi flag or Sufi blanket on it. And this is the front. My favourite thing about this is the little chintzy welcome mat. Directly above this, that's the internal grave. But directly above that mat is the chain that is used to help relieve people of spiritual possession. So the idea is that the actual shrine is so it's so holy that anybody who is afflicted by an evil spirit or a jinn can't pass the threshold. And there is the Ali Khan, the caretaker and exorcist, on his mobile. And I love this chandelier over the grave as well. And there he is. So I said he got this role. It was a hereditary role. He got after his father passed away. So how he explained the approach to things was, if somebody claimed to be possessed, their family brought them to the site. They were asked to hold the chain, and if they couldn't hold the chain, it was assumed that there was something fundamentally wrong. So they were tied to that chain to then force the issue. And he explained that he had a flag system to determine whether or not it was a mental health issue or something more sinister, jinn or spirit possession. He'd pray to the saint, and the saint would communicate with him. And intuitively, he'd see a green flag or a symbol if that person was not possessed, at which point he would advise the persons and their family to seek medical assistance. Alternatively, he sees a red image that would indicate the person was under the duress and influence of a jinn or evil spirit, and then they would commence exorcism. And the exorcism could take months. So a single iron chain hung above the welcome mat, the shrine's entrance. This shrine, as I explained, is where the exorcism take place. If a person is possessed, they can't hold the chain. Or pass into the shrine. Malevolent jinns and the souls of the restless dead could possess people. And this is what they believe, causing great mental and physical harm. And so once they determine that that's the case, they start work. And as I said earlier, this process could take months. The good news is I could hold the chain, which I was quite relieved. But as you can see, like it's so well used, it's taken the paint off it. Like, so this is like hundreds of people file in here over the years. It's been open. And here's some trees on the site with holy Sufi blankets. Now this is an interesting, a really interesting element to this particular site, and this is where I gave it the name Forest Prison of the Jinn. So once they start the process of exorcism, which could take months, it would end with the jinn or spirit imprisoned in clay pots called matkas. This is one. These pots dot the woods that surround the shrine, and to be honest, I felt quite nervous seeing them. I did ask if Ali Khan could show me some more, and he kind of politely declined. But I understand as well, because I felt like I was slightly nervous that if I broke one, that it was some sort of a spiritual landmine. I wanted to be wary of. But the really interesting thing about this is where you get the actual motif of a genie in the bottle is from this. The prison, spiritual prison for an entity. And this is where that whole idea comes from. And here we are in the modern day with belief in this existing in modern Delhi. The actual presidential palace is less than 5 minutes from here. So this is in the ambassador's district. There's this central ridge forest. It's remarkable. So you have all the kind of the absolute elite, political elite of Delhi, and in the center around this particular forest you have this going on. And here's a holy Sufi cloth hanging from the trees around the shrine. So again, it's sanctifying the woodlands. Some more iron chains. And again, it's got promises, titled trees and votives. Some older cloths in the woods. Now, this tying things to trees, again, is a very, very old, common thing, and you'll see it across Britain and Ireland related to holy wells. In Ireland, we call them clutie trees, where people tie rags to trees to gain favour from a saint. It's the same thing going on here. Now, this is Nizzamuddin Darragh, the Jinn of Old Delhi. Now, this is mentioned in Dalrymple's book. His apartment at the time was in the Nizzamuddin district, the home of the Sufi saint Hazrat Nizzamuddin Alia, and here amongst the Sufis, Dalrymple learnt a lot more about the fire spirits that inhabited Delhi. And this is arguably one of the most famous. The tomb is arguably one of the most famous Indian Sufis there is. And I got led through the warren of Old Delhi, past the harrying stall owners and cooks to get to this particular site. Now, this man is making a mutton biryani, which you would expect to see all around all the key Muslim areas in India. Should you be in any of these areas, I strongly suggest you do try a mutton biryani. It's absolutely a must-have. And here we have an array of sweet sellers on the way to the shrines, and of course people will buy these sweets not just to eat but to give to the saints at the shrines. And you can see there's all the hawkers selling souvenirs and items related to the Sufi tomb. Now this is the sign just as you come into the area around Nizzamuddin, and I'll just zoom in a bit closer. You can see what it says here. So, spiritual treatment for the solution of any kind of problem. Spiritual treatment for the solution of any kind of problem, e.g. business and marriage, propose, effect of bad air, children's success, love, education, journey, court case, etc. Everything. So, full service. But the really interesting thing is at the top of this sign, you see this, which is a magic square, which kind of gives you a little bit of the esoteric traditions as to what's happening here. So it's not just belief in spirits, but it's belief, or in exorcisms, but it's belief in being able to engage those spirits and petition them through different magical procedures, like magical squares.
How much you charge?
I don't know. I imagine it would be exorbitant. And here is Nizzamuddin, and it's a really, really beautiful site. Once you kind of come through Old Delhi and this little kind of tiny warren streets, and it opens up into this beautiful white marble plaza, it's absolutely stunning. It's really, really beautiful, and totally dazzling in the midday sun. And here, free food and water is supplied to the pilgrims. And it does have a really serene appearance, but it's still no less manic than the lanes of Old Delhi. And I was jostled around by pilgrims and beggars alike. And Nizzamuddin Alia's tomb is under the dome here. And Mughal Princess Jahanara's tomb is on the left, just by this arc here. She's in there. So this is a couple of shots just around the main tombs. Now a pilgrim here leaves a donation at one of the shrines for Amir Khusrau. He was a Sufi musician, poet and scholar, and an iconic figure in the cultural history of the Indian subcontinent, and he was a disciple of Nizzamuddin Alia. Now you can see the men are entering the central area. And as you can see, this is as far as I could get as well. So that's through the Jali screen. You can see the kind of core area here. But these red threads are again petitioning the saint to intercede in their behalf. So it's not just Jinn this relates to; it's also to the saints. And this is a quote from Dalrymple about this particular area. The pilgrims, all men, women were excluded from the interior shrine, slowly circled around the balustrade, heads bowed, hands cupped in invocation, stopping every so often to murmur prayers or recite mantras. So, as a non-Muslim, I was denied access to the graves as well, but was able to photograph them through the stone lattice.
Why were you denied?
Non-Muslim.
Non-Muslim?
Yeah,
Simply.
yeah.
Although you are a man.
Yes. Yeah. So here are some photographs through the screen. And this is another quote from Dalrymple. Through the lattice grills, you could see the dark shapes of barren ladies clawing at the rear of the tomb. Some tied threads to the jali string, each string a reminder to the sheikh to provide a woman with a longed-for male heir. And I guess that's one of the things that was particularly poignant for me, even though this being a good 25 or even more years after Dalrymple being there, that the same traditions were still there. They were still happening in the same sites, and that was a really special thing to witness. Though obviously it has changed hugely, there was still the same things happening. It's a young pilgrim boy and his family. It's a water seller and a pilgrim. And green being obviously a very holy colour to the Sufis. It's everywhere here. Elderly pilgrim. And a young albino boy and his mother. So people with general physical ailments might come to hope the saint would help alleviate those elements. Or indeed it would just be seen as a tourist destination, much as you have Westminster Cathedral here. The family of pilgrims. Now, after some discussion between Shams and the Pirzada, the official custodian of the Sufi mausoleums and shrines, we were pointed in the direction of this enclosure of lattice marble. So, bearing in mind, Shams, my fixer was talking to the Sufis about this. This Westerner wants to know about the Jinn, and how they relate to these sites. Again, this was initially perceived with why? What could you possibly want to know about this for? And the affliction that it causes on the community. But eventually they pointed me in the direction of this area. And this photograph is of the area where people who are possessed and afflicted with Jinn are being held. So this is where people who are believed to be suffering from Jinn possession or mental illness are held. This man, before this was actually translated to me, this man was really intensely staring at me, to the point where I felt quite unnerved by him. And then I found out what the area was. That kind of made me even more unnerved. But I still went up and took the photograph. But I'll be honest, given of the sites that I've been to in the past few days, the fact that it had been a very challenging trip, it had eroded my conviction somewhat. But I did take the photograph. And here he is again. There's somebody entering the compound. So as I said, it had been a challenging trip. Unexpected things had gone wrong. And my father accompanied me on this trip, which was wonderful. But unfortunately, he didn't have any luck either, and he actually broke his tooth in Heathrow Airport before we'd even left. So we really got off on the wrong foot. We changed hotel 3 times in as many days, and jet lag accompanied with relentless oppressive heat really made it a challenging trip. But I gathered myself and I took these photographs even as I was stared at, and I definitely struggled to hold his gaze afterwards. Part of me feared I had transgressed against the Djinns, and I found myself silently asking for their forgiveness. The sources in this lecture are City of Djinn, A Year in Delhi by William Dalrymple, Legends of the Fire Spirits by Robert Liebling, and The Arabian Nights, and the International Journal of Culture and Mental Health. I hope you enjoy that, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I hope you've got time to take a few questions.
Sure.
Because I'm sure there will be some. I wondered if I could just start with one of my own, really, which is you said that you had found these things going on very much as William Dalrymple had described them. There are clearly some signs of change over time. I'm not quite sure what time period. Padlocks, for example, wouldn't have been around at an early stage. On the other hand, the Djinns still seem to be imprisoned in clay pots rather than Tupperware boxes, for example. I mean, to what extent is there, do you think, an evolution going on here in Djinn worship?
It seems to be like a parallel belief that's is uncheckered or unaffected by modern development. I mean, you saw Ali Khan, the exorcist, in the second site, chatting away on his mobile phone. You know, prior to becoming the caretaker of that site, he had a quite normal middle class Indian job. So these things can really coexist without there being too much cognitive dissonance. And ironically enough, it brings me back to William Dalrymple, who kind of documented this in his book 9 Lives, where he went through how you had modern India and the modern roles or occupations people have that also exist side by side by deep ancient spiritual belief, where people who would I can't remember exactly, but people who had left jobs as IT professionals, whatnot, or became sadhus, you know, and living as they would have 5,000 years ago.
Questions from
You mentioned that iron being placed on cradles
Yeah.
in some societies to avert some Djinns or spirits.
Yeah.
In Lebanon, the colour blue and blue in the shape of an eye was used on cradles or on the doors of hospitals and maternity. I just wonder whether blue was traditionally something that
the
avoid.
The-
And, I thought, my memory is that it was to avoid the evil eye.
Yes,
So
that's it, yeah.
How is the evil eye associated with Jinn?
It's black magic, the Jinn, or Jinn possession rather, and the evil eye seem to be kind of those three core elements within superstition in Islam. And there's definitely a blurring of the borders between the three. And it's interesting you mentioned that it's a newborn ward, because there is that fear as I went through, particularly related to Lilith or Lilin demons, affecting children or losing children to her, and also as changelings as well. The blue, I don't know, but certainly the eye symbol is a protective charm to protect against the evil eye. It more than likely has some protective connotations for the Jinn as well, although I don't know that for sure. But these things tend to do both. Seems to be kind of a hedging of bets there.
Do the people only go to these sites when they have a problem? It seems that it's to ask rather than to give thanks. They're just going because they have a problem.
I think that's a fair assessment, or whether it's a problem or a desire for something. That would be the core reasons I saw there.
And how do they fit in going to the mosque? Or that's something quite
It seems something that's
separate?
quite different. Yeah. And again, they're very kind of, you would think there should be a problem between this and going to a mosque. Being kind of monotheistic, one God, yet this is worshipping of spirits. Particularly spirits that Muhammad is not fond of, and illustrates warnings against them. So, but weirdly, this isn't just Muslims going there. There's Hindus going there as well. Particularly in the first side, Feroz Shah Kotla, you would find Hindus as well as Muslims there to petition the Jinn.
And people of all education?
That I don't know. That I don't know.
I know you said they're invisible, but
Mhm.
are they represented in art in any form? Because in Islam you can't have a figure
Mhm.
portrayed.
Mhm.
So is there a conflict there with the Muslim worship? Are they represented in any, or just a flaming bush or something like that?
And within a lot of the older manuscripts, you would see paintings depicting Jinn. And they would be very similar to medieval European images depicting demons. You would have the horns, the kind of
I
reptilian.
noticed it had
Yeah,
horns, but
yeah.
how does that sit with Islam and not showing? I mean, it's animal, but
Yeah.
still
I think within Islam, it's specifically the depiction of Muhammad and Allah. But from what I've seen, they don't have any particular issues depicting the Jinn in the manuscripts that I've seen.
Any issues with you taking photographs in those places with the idea of them, the superstition of being out of the pots or being possessed with people and stuff, and you're there with a camera and
There was no actual no one asked me to stop. No one kind of said please don't take a photograph. But particularly around the pots, when I did ask to kind of go in and take closer photographs or of the larger clusters, at that point I was told no, and I did as I was told.
I'm just got a brief supplementary. I didn't catch what Khwaja referred to. Just the word Khwaja. Was it the place or Khwaja?
It was the place, yeah.
Right. And it's a particular association with Djinns.
That site is, yeah.
That particular site.
Yeah, it's believed to be the home of 10,000 Djinns.
I ask simply because people of light skin in Sudan are quite often called Khawajas.
Oh, really?
And,
Oh, that's interesting.
It's making me slightly disturbed to call it.
It's also an Indian surname, of course.
Yes,
Indian surname.
yeah.
I mean,
could I please ask you to thank Darragh Mason Field for coming. I found it fascinating and rather beautiful too.
Thank you.
Congratulations.